Did you know that during the 15th century, war was not just about swords and sieges? There were some seriously bizarre and ingenious secrets that would blow your mind. Stick around, because about to uncover some of the most unbelievable war secrets from the 15th century that they definitely didn't teach you in history class. Let's start with something you probably think you know: knights in shining armor. We picture them as these clunky, slow-moving tanks on the battlefield. And while the armor was heavy, it was also a masterpiece of engineering. Think of it less like a suit of metal and more like a custom-fit exoskeleton. Blacksmiths were the high-tech engineers of their day. They designed armor with articulated joints, allowing for a surprising range of motion. A knight in full plate could run, jump, and even do a somersault. It wasn't just about protection, it was about creating a super soldier. The metal was often fluted and curved to deflect blows, not just absorb them. So, the image of a knight being hoisted onto his horse by a crane. Mostly a myth. These guys were agile and deadly. But what if you weren't a wealthy knight? What if you were just a regular soldier? Well, you had to get creative. One of the most terrifying and effective weapons wasn't a sword or an arrow, but something much simpler: the caltrop. These were small, four-pointed iron devices. No matter how you threw them on the ground, one spike always pointed up. Imagine an army of cavalry charging at full speed, only to run into a field of these hidden in the grass. It was devastating for horses and could instantly break a cavalry charge, leaving the riders vulnerable. It was cheap, easy to make, and incredibly effective. A simple but brilliant piece of medieval area denial. Now, let's talk about getting inside a castle. Sieges could last for months, even years. So, attackers had to come up with some pretty clever tricks. Forget just battering rams and catapults. One of the most successful tactics was something called sapping or mining. A team of specialized soldiers, called sappers, would dig tunnels under the castle walls. It was incredibly dangerous work. They had to be quiet, avoid detection, and deal with the constant risk of the tunnel collapsing. Once they were under a wall or a tower, they would prop up the tunnel with wooden beams. Then, they'd pile inflammable materials like brushwood and pig fat, light a fire, and get out fast. As the wooden supports burned away, the section of the wall above would just collapse, creating a breach for the attacking army to pour through. It was psychological warfare as much as it was engineering. The defenders knew there could be men digging right under their feet at any moment. But the defenders had their own tricks. Ever heard of a murder hole? These were holes in the ceilings of gateways or passages in a castle. If attackers managed to break through the outer gate, the defenders could drop all sorts of nasty things on them from above: rocks, boiling water, hot sand, and even quicklime, which could blind them. The hot sand was particularly clever because it would get inside their armor and cause agonizing burns. It wasn't about a fair fight, it was about making the attackers' lives a living nightmare. Let's move on to something a bit more explosive. The 15th century was a time of transition. While knights were still a major force, gunpowder was starting to change everything. Early firearms and cannons were unreliable and dangerous, but they had a huge psychological impact. The noise, the smoke, the sheer destructive power, it was terrifying for soldiers who had never seen anything like it. One of the earliest forms of hand cannons was basically a small cannon on a stick. It was wildly inaccurate and took forever to reload, but can you imagine facing a line of soldiers holding these things? It was the beginning of the end for the age of castles and knights. Speaking of gunpowder, it wasn't just used for cannons. There were early forms of hand grenades. These were often clay or iron spheres filled with gunpowder and a fuse. You'd light the fuse, hope it didn't go out or explode in your hand, and toss it over the wall. They were just as likely to harm the user as the enemy, but in the chaos of a battle, they were a terrifying new weapon. Think about the courage, or maybe the desperation, it took to be one of the first soldiers to use one of these. Now for a truly weird one, animal warfare. And I'm not just talking about war horses. People got really creative. One bizarre account from this era involves using cats and birds as incendiary devices. The idea was to attach a small bag of flammable material with a lit fuse to an animal captured from the enemy's city. The terrified animal would then instinctively run back to its home, a barn, a house, a stable, and start a fire deep inside the enemy's defenses. It sounds unbelievably cruel, and its actual effectiveness is heavily debated by historians, but it shows the lengths people would go to gain an edge. The sheer creativity of medieval warfare is just mind-boggling. Let's also touch upon spies and codes. Communication was key. Getting a message from a commander to a unit on the other side of the battlefield, or from a king to an allied army, was a huge challenge. Messages could be easily intercepted, so they developed simple but effective codes. Ciphers, where letters were substituted for other letters or symbols, became more common. Messengers would have to memorize complex routes, travel at night, and often disguise themselves. A captured messenger could mean disaster for an entire army. The world of 15th century espionage was a high-stakes game of cat and mouse that was just as important as the battles themselves. And finally, let's not forget psychological warfare. Sometimes the most powerful weapon was fear. Commanders would use all sorts of tricks to intimidate their enemies. Vlad the Impaler, the inspiration for Dracula, was famous for this. He would impale thousands of his enemies on stakes outside his city as a gruesome warning to any invading armies. It was brutal, but it worked. Other tactics included using loud instruments and horns to disorient and frighten the enemy before a charge, or catapulting diseased animal carcasses over castle walls to spread sickness and despair. War wasn't just a physical contest, it was a battle for the mind. So, the next time you watch a movie about the Middle Ages, remember it was so much more than just clashing swords. It was a world of ingenious engineering, desperate tactics, and terrifying psychological games. From armored super soldiers and hidden fields of spikes to tunnel explosions and incendiary animals, the 15th century was a hotbed of military innovation that truly shaped the way wars would be fought for centuries to come. The creativity and ruthlessness of warfare back then is something that continues to fascinate and horrify us today. What did you find the most surprising? Let me know in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this journey into the past, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell icon so you don't miss our next deep dive into history's hidden secrets. See you next time.